How do I beat someone else at that? How do I become more effective than someone else? So that's all very utilitarian and very focused. And now we're going to talk about the evolution of how that mindset, that how do I get this job done? And that job is injuring other people or defending yourself, and how that gets turned into art and fun and games. And I'm going to reference a lot of specific cultures here, but I'm going to try not to give any credit to one person, because nobody invented this. This belongs to everybody. Human beings would have done this one way or the other. This is just how it happened to pan out. One of the earliest versions of martial arts as performance we have written down are gladiators, right? People fighting for entertainment. But those gladiators weren't fighting efficiently or in a utilitarian manner, whether they were the Aztecs or the Romans or the Greeks or the Vikings, any combat sport at the time. They were using techniques that were impressive. They were swinging the swords all the way around their body to show the audience how strong they were. They were parrying their opponent's sword and disarming it to show how clever they were. It was already a performance art, even when the goal was still to defend yourself. Some very specific places where we can go, oh, this is a point in history where martial became art. In medieval Germany, there was a guy named Talhofer. He published a couple books, some of the earliest books on swordsmanship that we can prove were written and then printed. And a lot of what he talks about is this very direct forward movement, this constant propulsion of energy and very efficient strikes, always aiming for a specific spot over and over again. Very effective, but, you know, incredibly boring to watch. One of his students was a guy named Joachim Meyer, who saw that as time progressed and, you know, people were killing each other en masse and individual duels were just less and less common, that it was becoming a sport. And a lot of what he talks about in his book, The Art of Combat, which was written a couple hundred years later, or published a couple hundred years later, written when he was alive, I hope. A lot of what he talks about is how best to impress, how best to show an audience what you're doing. And it's that showing an audience what a sword, where a sword is going, moving and cueing and showing everyone what's happening, which is not what you want in a fight. You want to keep your opponent guessing, but that showing of skill really follows its way now into modern stage combat and modern circus arts. As recently as the Victorian era, we had these giant mock battles where people were digging out pits of water to have mock naval battles. And they were building incredibly complex fighting terrains for people to test their skills on. But they were using blunted weapons, and some parts of the fights were choreographed to better tell the story. And we get to see the beginning of combat theater there, like just a taste of it. While on the other side of the world in China, they had figured it out about 2,000 years ahead of time. Chinese opera and Chinese acrobatic theater have always sort of grown alongside their martial traditions. A lot of it is based in Shaolin Kung Fu. A lot of it is based in other monastic disciplines. And so even now, if you go see a lot of Chinese acrobatics or traditional Chinese theater, they're doing crazy stunts where they're kicking through hula hoops suspended in the air, and they're doing a lot of fire props and sword props. So everybody was evolving a little slower than everybody else. In some traditions, especially island nations and native cultures of North and South America, we saw performance and martial arts used as training for each other. The Filipino martial arts are the most common example. A lot of their stick and knife fighting is evolved alongside and trained with their dancing and their traditional movement. And you see progression of skills that they teach. And in the more traditional Filipino martial arts schools, you'll see them start with stick, move to empty hand and stick, and eventually get to the point where they're actually fighting with a piece of cloth. And it really does look like a beautiful sort of dance. Stage combat as we know it, the idea of staging a fight as part of a larger production, as opposed to the focus being the stage combat, we can trace to the Victorian era mostly. There have always been fights and shows and plays as long as we've had plays, but modern choreography sort of evolved in the Victorian era around a discipline we called single sword. Basically, they took some competition saber fencers and gave them very thick blades that were very easy to see on stage with really complicated, ornate guards. And you can already see where we start to get like the Errol Flynn, Musketeer, golden age of Hollywood sword out of this kind of thing. And the style didn't change much from Victorian to then. What they did is they took this weapon, they had these saber fencers who do a lot of slashing and hacking, and they paired them with ballet instructors, and they added spins, and they added all sorts of different flourishes so that the audience could see how strong the fighters were and how movement focused they were and what the techniques were doing. And it's almost like they developed a fantasy martial art. I actually compare it a lot to Star Wars, where a lightsaber has its own physics, and we can recognize when a lightsaber is being used well or poorly, but it has nothing to do with the physics in combat that we live with every day. And it's the same thing with these single swords. And fortunately or unfortunately, the vocabulary that we use to describe stage combat now, even in action movies or fights in Broadway where we're using long swords or spears or whatever, we're still using the vocabulary that was established for these single swords, for these fantasy martial arts. How do we get to circus from here? Because we've talked a lot about classical theater and we haven't talked a lot about circus stuff. Well, modern balance props are almost entirely based on a martial art of some sort. Poi was originally a weapon, those fun spinny balls some hippies set on fire sometimes. Balance staff is really popular in circ acts right now, and it's just a quarter staff that's weighted slightly differently. And modern flow culture, as far as movement, really has focused on the physical discipline and the improvisation of these arts, whereas stage combat is, again, all about the choreography. So sometimes you'll see guys who are working in both disciplines at once. If you're interested in that sort of thing, there's a guy named Jake Gwynn out of Atlanta working with a company called Havoc Movement, and he combines improvised flow arts with choreographed stage combat. Really just phenomenal work. And that sort of brings us to why this is important, why the conversation is happening. Because we can trade information really freely through the internet, through videos, because street performance is what it is and is so popular now and is so heavily recorded, you can see two guys doing a very simple balance bit. And then 3 months later, there will be a production of Shakespeare where the Hamlet sword fight, where the guy does the disarm to kill the bad guy. It's that same juggling trick. There's so much crosstalk and so much work being done to share that information. Specifically that example, the Hamlet sword fight. If anybody has seen or read Hamlet, it is the only piece of Shakespeare's works where he's got fight choreography put in it. To beat the bad guy, Hamlet has to disarm his dagger, switch his dagger with the enemy's dagger, and stab the bad guy with the bad guy's dagger. That's pretty complicated and is pretty martially difficult because you're fighting with the sword in one hand and the dagger in the other, and now you have to figure out a way where both people are switching weapons, and it happens on purpose. And that singular motion alone has been responsible for huge amounts of crosstalk between circus and stage combat, just because most of us aren't jugglers. And to see juggling and other circus techniques put into stage combat, especially for that fight, but for fights in general, really, I'm going to drop some links to Erica, and if you have any interest in that, really beautiful stuff. But a lot of the crosstalk, a lot of the combination of effort and technique is coming not from what we see on stage, but from practices and ways that we train. A lot of stage combatants and actor combatants will take martial arts classes so that their fights look more realistic and more open and are better showing the audience what the audience expects to see. Because in stage combat, it's not just about, oh, this looks accurate or, oh, this makes sense. The audience has to think, ah, I believe that that could happen. And that's where we get into circus and other forms of movement arts. As people are more likely to see circus shows, as people are less likely to see other kinds of shows, as people are more likely to go see superhero movies, what the audience expects is going to change. Marvel has done more to alter the scape of what an unarmed fist fight looks like in theater and screen than anybody could do in 100 years. I cannot tell you how many times that a director has asked me, oh, could you make this look like a Captain America thing, like a crash and go? Well, that's not possible, but sure, we can do that. And how do we honor the past, right? Like, how do we have this conversation about martial arts as a utilitarian tool and as a competition and as a way to perform and connect and have self-discipline and as a way to connect with these purely aesthetic arts, with these purely beautiful circus arts? I don't know. And that's sort of what the next bit of this Q&A is going to be. I'm not really sure the best way to do that. I've trained in destreza, which is a Spanish martial art that developed out of a dueling art, but has now become very beautiful and very dance focused. And it has this movement based on an 8-step circle. And I love it very much, but I also recognize it's very far removed than what the old masters had in mind. There's a lot of combinations of arts, and somebody will have a fight where there's a lot of Kung Fu in one moment, and suddenly they switch to a Krav Maga inspired move, and now they're back, they've picked up sticks and they're fighting with swords like they're French musketeers. Is that okay? If it tells a good story, are we all right with it? That is a conversation that we're going to have probably forever. So I'm going to open the floor up to a Q&A. Please, this is going to be a little difficult to do via video, so just if you have a question, speak up and I'll try to sort through it. And I'd like this to be a conversation. It's hard to talk about all of stage combat and circus in such a short form without more examples and without 10 other instructors with me, but I'm going to do my best to answer any questions you have. I started out, I was asked, how did you get interested in this? I started out at a Kung Fu school while my mom worked at a Renaissance fair, and I was really terrible at Kung Fu, frankly. Not great. But I loved a style called Bagua, which is a style of Kung Fu from central China that's based on this beautiful circular motion. And one of my instructors was like, all right, if this is what you want to do, you don't do this. He got me in touch with a Spanish fencing school. And then while working at the Renaissance Fair and working with reenactment groups, I got in touch with a bunch of stage combat instructors. And if you're interested in stage combat or movement arts as it pertains to stage combat, there are schools in New York and New Jersey, and I can get their information to Erica or whoever else might be able to distribute that best. Any other questions? I do not have a background in dance. That was another question that just came up. However, a lot of stage combatants do. I have certainly taken dance classes since doing this, and I've taken circus classes. I've taken a lot of ballet. Ballet is actually super helpful with German longsword, which is pretty funny. They're both based on this sort of hollow upper body stance, this thing, right? The difference between being here and being here isn't a whole lot. And so I've taken a lot of dance, but I find that fighters with a dance background, really graceful, really elegant, really put the blade where it needs to go to keep everyone safe, just phenomenal. Anything else?
I have a question for you, Josh. What is your favorite piece that you've choreographed, or favorite realm? Do you like the history? Do you like the more modern?
Okay.
I'm assuming you have a preference, but
yeah, those are both two great questions. My favorite piece I ever choreographed was for a play called Comic Potential, and it's actually, I think it's the first thing I ever choreographed on a stage, which does not bode well for the rest of my career. But the play is very complicated and it involves robots doing stand-up comedy. But there's a scene where somebody has to attack someone with a knife, and it's supposed to be bad. It's supposed to be the only serious moment of the play. And I have seen a lot of people choreograph knife fights where it's this big, long, flowing motion, and fine, I can see how that would look good on a stage. But for this, early 20s, first time on the job, I was like, that's not what a stabbing looks like. And I choreographed a very uptight, really close, pretty visceral attack And we put it really close to the audience and we lit it really well. And it told the story in 2 seconds. Was it beautiful? I have no idea. Probably not. Was it effective? Absolutely. And then my favorite thing to choreograph is actually that golden age of Hollywood Victorian swordsmanship we were talking about. That Errol Flynn, really just pure fantasy, as far away removed from what I just talked about doing as possible, using a thin sword to make giant cuts that would never work. Just absolute fun and no respect for physics or sense. There's a show I choreographed at the New York Renaissance Fair, and hopefully I get to put it up on stage somewhere else, or maybe there in the future, called Four Swords, which is all about that. It's just 4 different guys doing that work 4 different ways. Any other questions? I've got some movement if you guys want to get up and move. Yeah.
My question is, would you compare your, I'm sorry, okay. My question is, would you compare your work with motion pictures and live on stage, and how do they compare, or which do you prefer and what's different? Please,
yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I am definitely a stage guy. I'm going to answer my preference right away. I'm definitely a stage guy, but there are different things, right? Like when you're working on a stage, unless you're working in outdoor theater, like a theme park or a Renaissance fair, I would even count a cruise ship in this, unless you're working where you've got sort of an unorthodox audience spacing where the audience is around you, your moves all have to be 2-dimensional. Your audience is in one space and they don't have a lot of depth perception. Their perception might be impaired because of light or dark or sound or whatever. You can't draw their focus artificially. In film, I can put the camera wherever I want. I can grab your eyeballs and move them. Also in film, there's a lot more finicky stuff, right? Like if I have a punch to the face and I want that punch to look like it's going to send me across the room, after it's filmed, I can have them remove a frame from the video right after the punch made contact, so it looks like I'm flying away faster than I was hit. And you can't do that on stage. There's interesting things that people are doing with lighting and sound right now. There's a company out of Brooklyn called Neutral Chaos. They're doing really cool work using speakers underneath people's seats to make some hits feel heavier and some hits feel lighter. But on stage, there's just nowhere to hide unless you're using that 2-dimensional space to sort of hide things behind people. But on a camera, I can grab what you're seeing and move it. I can focus you where I want to put you. I'm sorry, there's another question in chat. Oh, carry over from stage combat to real combat. That depends on the choreographer. There's a guy, and again, I can send videos of anything I'm name dropping to Erica so that you guys can watch it if you're interested. There's a guy out of Florida named Dan Grenke. He focuses on very historically accurate combat. He did some of the fight work for the TV show Vikings. A coworker of his that I've worked with closely named Pat Kelly worked on Game of Thrones. Some of the fights in Game of Thrones are just pure fantasy nonsense. Some of them, they're using the proper guards, they're using the proper footwork. The effects are exaggerated, but pretty accurate for German longsword and that kind of really full sweeping, full body attack. Then again, you watch like Hong Kong cinema or Chinese theater and people are doing wire work, or people are throwing these huge punches that would never actually connect. And that's less so. It's really a stylistic choice. You can see really, really hyper accurate films. Those are usually pretty boring to me. I think the more you know about martial arts, the more you're willing to let that go and just enjoy the thing. Anything else?
I think we're good. I think you can move into your.
Cool. So you guys can get up and move with me. It's actually going to be pretty short. I'm going to leave the physicality to my more appropriate colleague. But so as you get up and stand, really, I want you to think about your feet just a little bit above shoulder width apart. And I want you to take your left leg and just take a single step forward. I wish I could aim this at my feet. We're going to try. Yeah, not so much. All right, oh well. Good thing that footwork's not super important for what we're about to do. We're going to stand up. We're going to take our left leg, take that step forward. We're going to bend our knees. We're going to have our left foot, which is in front of us, pointed directly at what our opponent is. I'm going to switch the word opponent for partner because we want to be nice to our partner. And we want to take our right leg and sort of put it at a 45, right? Like our foot's going to be pointed just off of our partner. There we go. And the first footwork we're going to do is very simple. We're going to push off of our back leg and step forward with our front leg. We're just going to sort of pull forward. That's right. That's an advance. And let me see if I can get this so you can see my feet. Hang on one moment. I apologize. Good enough. So can everybody see my feet sort of for the most part?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. You're going to push off your back leg and then catch forward with your front leg. And then you're going to settle back. And then you're going to go backwards. So that's our advance and retreat. Advance is forward, retreat is backwards. And while that looks incredibly simple, that's the basis for pretty much all stage combat right now. You have advances and retreats, and you have the 5 guards. There are technically 9, but 4 of them are just the other 5 backwards. So I'm going to do my absolute best here. I had a camera, it did not work. All right, so if we're in that stance, our first guard, and I'm going to do this with a sword. These guards aren't usually used unarmed, but you can put your hand wherever your hand needs to go. So 1, I call it the look at your watch. You literally just bring your hand, yep, and if your sword's extending downward, it would be blocking the lower left side of your body. 2, it's just a windshield wiper out. Yeah. 3 is down. So you just take it and rotate it down. Yep, you just turn in your wrist. And then 4, all the way across your body. And I like 4 because it tells me what it is. It makes the number 4. And then 5, just lift your arm up. There you go. And so what's important about the order of these parries isn't what number is what. It's that it tells you you have to create oppositional force as you're blocking. It tells you, okay, you're going to go across your body and parry here. So the audience knows there's enough force to move you this way. Then you're going to go across your body the other way. So the audience knows there's enough force to block that attack. Then you're going to go down, and that's still generating enough force.
Whoops.
There you go.
Sorry.
That's all right. So you're going to bring it down, and that's generating enough force. As long as you're crossing your body in these paths, that's going to create the imaginary force to make the audience believe you can block that. Number 4 is also simple. It gets to go all the way across your body and wind up, which means the audience often perceives 4 as the biggest parry. It's the closest to your body. It has to move the furthest. It looks the most desperate because the sword ends closest to me. So if I'm blocking low and someone attacks here and I go here, regardless of the fact that I'm safe the whole time, it looks a lot scarier. And then 5 is the hero parry, right? We just lift our sword up. This is a nice shot for the Facebook profile picture, your audition shot, whatever. And everything else is a variation on that. Everything else is, oh, we're going to hold our arm this way to make this parry, or we're going to wrap it around our body. But if you know those 5 numbers and how to walk forward and backward without picking up your whole leg, that's it. I could choreograph anybody with just that. Any other questions or comments before I pass it on, knowing that I'm going to give Erica any information that I dropped just so everybody's got it? How much does a sword generally weigh? Okay, that depends. A single sword like this, less than a pound. A broadsword, which is the long, big, hacky weapon we all think about, I would say as much as 3 pounds. If I'm swinging around a sword that weighs more than 3 pounds, I better be making $40 an hour. And that doesn't sound like a lot of weight, right? But you got to think about all that weight extended outside of you, thinking about moving it like a lever which increases the weight of the sword for the purposes of attack, also increases the physical weight of the sword or mechanical weight of the sword on me. That's all strain on my arms and my body that I'm going to feel across my whole body and into my hip. Historically, swords were a lot lighter than people think they were. And now, a lot of the weapons I use are made of aluminum because I don't want to do that much work. Anything else? Excellent. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to pass this over to my friend Davide, who is going to teach you much more practically applicable stuff.
All right, thank you so much. I can share my screen, right? Erica, yeah? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, so give me a second. Let me share my screen. And let me just find that presentation. Whoops. Okay, so today we are talking about Krav Maga. Well, let me get this thing going here, slideshow. All right, everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Great, awesome. Okay, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is David, and I'm the owner and instructor, chief instructor for Krav Maga New York. I hear a little bit of a background noise. Is that me? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so let me start again. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Davide. I'm the owner and chief instructor of Krav Maga New York. We're located right next to the Elephant Hotel in Somers. Our organization, Krav Maga New York, offers fitness and self-defense classes to men, women, and kids of all ages, and we offer classes every day of the week. Our classes are unique because Krav Maga is unique. So let me tell you a little bit about Krav Maga, how it developed, and the story behind it. Krav Maga was founded by a man named Emi Lichtenfeld. You'll see him here in the pictures in different stages of his life. Emi was born in 1910 and grew up in Slovakia. His father was not only the town's police officer, but also owned the local gym. Growing up, Emi participated heavily in boxing, wrestling, gymnastics, and won many titles. In the 1920s and early 30s, in Emi's part of the world, things were quickly deteriorating for Jews. Emi found himself having to fight to defend himself and his community. He would organize with his friends from the gym, and they would go out and protect each other and protect their families and protect their community. And some of those fights turned out to be all-out brawls, and in some cases, weapons were also involved. He quickly realized that sports had very little to do with real-life self-defense and violence. And it was right about then when Emi realized two very crucial things about fighting and about self-defense. First, true self-defense, not sport combat, is responsive. And the best response is an instinctive response rather than a learned response. Because you can learn you can learn a technique or a way to defend something until you're blue in the face, but in the end, whatever comes out of you instinctively, whatever is hardwired in your body as a human being as an instinctive response, that's going to override anything that you've learned. So Emi realized that whatever defenses needed to be executed need to initiate with an instinctive initial response. That was one of the things he realized. And second, he also realized that the instinctive response needs to immediately be followed by counterattacks. Because otherwise, if you're just defending, there's only so much of that you can do until your defense is penetrated and you become vulnerable and you are defeated. So the initial response has to be instinctive. That's what he realized. And he also realized once I defend myself, I need to immediately counter to prevent subsequent attacks. It was these realizations early on in Emi's life that later translated into some of the basic principles of Krav Maga. And we'll get into that shortly. But let me fast forward a little bit. In the 1940s, Emi fled Slovakia for Palestine. There, he was quickly recognized for his tactics and his fighting abilities. In 1948, during the formation of the Israeli state, Emi was tapped for a role as chief instructor to lead physical fitness and Krav Maga for the IDF School for Combat Training. This is when Krav Maga really began to take shape into a codified system. Krav Maga is not a technique-based martial arts or system of self-defense. Instead, it's principle-based. This basically means that within the realm of a physical confrontation, all techniques are valid, all kinds of techniques. There is no one technique that's going to work better than the other. They're all relevant as long as they apply the principles, the Krav Maga principles. And I'll take you through some of those principles now. One of the first one, or the first one, I should, and they're no particular order, right? It's not like first, second, there's just 5 of them, okay? First, Krav Maga cannot be reliant on gender, size, strength, or ability. All you really need is a mindset and the will to want to survive. What I happen to call software versus hardware. The software, what's in our mindset, what's in our brain, our will to survive is more important than the physical tools that we have. Right? The second one, Krav Maga cannot be complicated. Krav Maga techniques must be nothing more than instinct followed by an aggressive response. Third, Krav Maga cannot be the kind of system that takes years and years to learn and master. Krav Maga has to build participants to a high level of proficiency in a comparatively short period of time. I call this the 1,000 principles, and it's I don't know that I call it that. I think it came from Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee used to say, practice one technique 1,000 times as opposed to practicing 1,000 different techniques one time each. Okay. Fourth, every defensive response has to have an immediate offensive response. We talked about that just a minute ago. So it's always block and counter. It's never just block and counter, block and counter, block and counter, sometimes repeated counters as necessary. I call this the +1 principle, right? So whatever it is that we defend ourselves, we have to add something behind that. That's the +1 principle. Block and add at least 1 counter. And the last thing, number 5, survival is the goal, right? That's the ultimate goal. That's the thing that we're looking to do. And if that means that we have to cheat in order to achieve that goal, then we look for opportunities to cheat so we can achieve that goal. So that's a little bit about Krav Maga. The last thing I will add, because Krav Maga is a fighting system, it has a reputation of being very aggressive, very strong, very straightforward, very ruthless in some ways, right? I just want to end with Imi's own words, right? And one of his most famous quotes. The purpose of Krav Maga, the idea behind Krav Maga is to educate and build people mentally, spiritually, and physically, so that in a time of need, one will be able to defend and attack with maximum efficiency. The next sentence, to establish in one a sense of self-worth, which I think is just an amazing thing to add into a martial arts system, right? And I think that's what that's a lot of what Krav Maga does with people that I see and that I train. Over time, they feel like they feel a sense of uniqueness. Okay, they have a skill, they have a power that they didn't have before, and that makes them unique, and it makes them feel a sense of self-worth, and it makes them realize also that they can help themselves and it can help other people around them. The quote ends with, to work towards the bringing together of hearts and the ending of violence around the world between all people, irrespective of color, race, or religion. And then at the very bottom there, you'll see something that says, so that one may walk in peace. That is a very popular thing that Krav Maga students and Krav Maga schools and training centers say. Some of them have it written on the wall as soon as you walk in, so that one may walk in peace. You see it on t-shirts, you see it all over the place in the Krav Maga community. And for a long period of time, I thought that meant so that one would walk in peace because I know Krav Maga and I can defend myself. And then I started to realize over time that that's not really, I don't think that that's really what it means. I think that, learning self-defense, learning martial arts, it has a great benefit, yeah, because you're empowered. And yes, you do have skills. God forbid something were to happen to you. But I think more importantly, it's the sense of calm that you feel inside when you have that level of skill, when you have that mindset, when you have those abilities. You can walk around feeling more confident, and situations are not as threatening as they would otherwise seem if you didn't have a skill set. So to me, that wording or that sentence or that phrase, so that one may walk in peace, has changed over time. I used to think of it from a macho perspective, so that I can walk in peace because, I know Krav Maga. And then I started to realize, if I know Krav Maga, I tend to not want to use it because I understand the consequences behind it. And so, but I do feel relieved that I can face situations, talk to people, and not feel fear, because I know that in my back pocket I carry this Krav Maga card, and I know it's a very powerful card. So it helps me deal with everyday life. So that sentence has taken on different meaning for me, you know, as time went on. So that's a little bit about Krav Maga, a little bit of the history about Krav Maga. Try to keep it short because I would like to give you guys also a lesson and get you guys training a little bit. But before we do that, maybe if you have questions, I will answer your questions. I'll stop sharing my screen, by the way. Let's see if we can stop screen share. There we go.
So
okay. Yeah,
a lot of what you talked about, the philosophy rather than specific techniques and software over hardware, how do you train that? Like, how do you begin to train a mindset rather than a series of movements?
yeah. So it's okay. So for starters, I think that a lot of people that come to us already have the mindset. I tell people all the time when they come into our training center, you probably did the hardest thing today just by showing up, because it's been in your head, this feeling of I should learn something, I need to learn something, I want to learn something, I want to learn how to defend myself. You've probably had it for a while. You didn't wake up this morning and decide, oh, okay, today I'm going to join Krav Maga. You've probably seen something, you've probably felt something over a long period of time, and now it's just coming out of you, and now you made the final decision. So I think that a lot of people that come training with us already have the mindset, they just may not know it. So I think that's part of it, right? If they don't have the mindset, I think that over time, they get to realize that it's okay to be in a room and hit something, a pad, right? To work on a pad. And initially, you know, when I see students performing techniques to working on pads, they're very shy and very light, because our entire life we've been told, don't raise your hands, don't yell, don't hit anything, you know, keep okay. But so initially they're very shy, but then after a while, when they start to realize that it's okay for me to be powerful, I should be powerful, it's okay for me to feel that way, then you see that they are striking harder, getting more aggressive, and they get to realize that it's okay to be two different people. I can be a nice guy, a nice person all day long, walk around and say hello and hold the door for people, but at the same time have this other side of me that says, no, you can't put your hands on me. And if you try to, and if I say no and you don't listen, yes, I can be very strong. So I think that, you know, the mindset develops. First of all, I think that when people come in, they already feel something inside of them that motivates them to come in. So I think a little piece is already there. But then I think that all we do is bring it out and bring it to light and make them understand that it's okay to have that sensation of wanting to survive, wanting to, you know, if something happens to me, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to fight. I think that we all have that inside of us. It's just that, you know, over time, it's been quieted down through our environment. Josh, let me know if I answered your question. Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see here. What is the age range of your clients? So for our adults, believe it or not, it's mid-30s, 40s. That's the medium age we've had. I think the oldest male that we've ever had was 72 years old. The oldest female was probably right around there, 69, 70. That was the oldest that we've had. But yeah, we're somewhere in the middle, around mid-30s, 40s. You know, Facebook tells me that our population, you know, our audience is 35 to 55. So it's not younger than that, according to Facebook. So there we go. Okay. That's a clientele. As far as kids, it's 4 years old to, you know, 14, 15 when they transition from, you know, into adulthood, pretty much. At least for Krav Maga purposes, you know, a 15, 16-year-old, we would consider an adult. Depending on their maturity level, of course, also. But yeah, right about that age, they start going into adult classes. The next question I have is what got me interested in Krav Maga? Okay, so funny thing, I started martial arts for absolutely no particular reason at all. I was in my 20s. I needed something to do. I needed an activity. You know, my friends, I was going to college at the time. My friends were hanging out on a Tuesday night and they were calling me, hey, you want to hang out with us? And I realized this can't be good. You know, I need something more constructive to do. So I signed up for a martial arts class, not even by choice. I had my cousin that constantly bothered me saying, hey, I signed up for this martial arts school. You should come come with me. He was nagging me for over a month. And finally, just to shut him up, I said, fine, I'll take a class as long as you leave me alone after this. So I went in and took a class and I just never left, I guess. And that class wasn't even Krav Maga. It was a traditional form of martial arts. I did that for a few years, and the instructor that I was training under began to teach this Krav Maga thing. I had no idea what it was, but he was my instructor, so I stuck with it. And one of the things that I realized about Krav Maga is that it was totally different from, you know, everything else I learned those 5 years with that instructor. So I was with that instructor for 5 years. I learned traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. Then he introduces Krav Maga, and suddenly Krav Maga is totally different, and in some ways, you know, opposite of what he had taught all along. Like, just to give you an example, for my Japanese jiu-jitsu black belt, I had to learn 12 different defenses against a knife stab. Okay, one was here, take the hand around, flip them over the shoulder, 12 different defenses. Then I got to Krav Maga and it was just one, block and punch. And I'm like, that's it? That's all I need to know? So I was curious to figure out, well, you know, which one is right? Is it Krav Maga or is it the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu? Like, I didn't understand what was happening, right? And over time, I realized that Krav Maga is probably, for me anyway, Krav Maga was probably the way to go, because it was just easier from the standpoint of I had one thing to learn. It was always the same thing. And so I could get more practice repetitions in. And when I became an instructor, I realized I have one thing to teach. I can teach it more effectively. My students can learn it better. They can get more reps in. So it just made sense for me that Krav Maga was the way to go. But again, that came all out of, it wasn't intentional. It was all a big mistake, I guess you can say. I ended up here today, you know, as a result of a mistake. Not a mistake, but, you know, an incident that was beyond my control. All right, let's see here. How did you get interested in Krav Maga? And there's a question for both Josh and I. It's Josh, so I don't know if you saw it.
Yep.
I'll let you go first, Josh.
Yeah, I've actually gotten a lot of boxers who are super interested in fencing and working on that advance and retreat, because it's very similar to a boxing advance and retreat. And yeah, I haven't gotten anything else, actually. I just had 3 or 4 boxers come in and be like, hey, I saw your footwork. You trained at this gym, or you did this thing with me. Can we just work on this?
Yeah. For me, I've gotten football players that have come to me that want Krav Maga training, and what I specifically focus with them on is the blocks, the 360 blocks, because I never play football, but I see them, you know, they push each other on the shoulder pads because they can't grab and hold necessarily when they're lined up. So they tend to want to push each other. And so I worked with one particular you know, young athlete, and the things that we worked on is when the shoulder pad push is coming, knock it away and drag the arm and get around them. So yeah, I've had the opportunity to work with football players. They wanted to work on hand speed, hand-eye coordination, blocking those strikes that come in, which simulate punches, I guess you can think of it that way, right? And so being able to block them and moving outside to the dead side of the body, outside the elbow.
I'm just checking our Facebook Live feed to see if any questions popped up there.
Okay.
I don't believe so. So then I will ask a leading question of, if we were interested in supporting you and thanking you for your time or looking up more, where would we go for both of you?
For me, it would be either our Facebook page, Krav Maga New York, or our website. KravMagaNewYork.us, or you just search for Krav Maga in Somers or Krav Maga New York in Somers, and you'll find our Facebook page. Everything is on our Facebook page.
For me, it's either the Haberbashery, which I think Erica has the link for, which is our Facebook page for our fight studio, or Second Ridge Studio, and I'll get that to her. That's the Facebook page for our armory and prop studio.
So if that's okay, I would like to take you guys through some Krav Maga. 5 minutes of Krav Maga training, cool? All right. If you guys have the opportunity to, and I promise you anybody can do this, right? Anybody can do this. So we're gonna start the same way Josh started, which I thought was very interesting. Our stance is same exact as his, right? So I'm gonna lower my camera so you guys can see my feet. This is my left leg. This is my right leg. I'm a righty. I'm gonna step forward with my left leg. My toes are facing forward, and I'm gonna bend my knee so that my center of gravity is low. That's it. This is my ready position, my fighting stance position. From here, if I'm gonna move forward, I'm gonna do just like Josh did in fencing, open and close my feet, open and close. If I'm gonna move back, I'm gonna open and close my feet, open and close my feet. So I can move forward, I can move back, and of course I can move right or left, and again, open and close, open and close. So my feet are always staying outside my shoulder line, right? From this position now, with my legs that way, I'm also gonna pick up my hands. So now I can move forward, my hands are up, I can move back, I can move to my right, I can move to my left. And this is the basics of my stance and how I move. Of course, if my opponent is in front of me, I also wanna circle around my opponent. So I'm gonna take those same motions and just scoot off to one side or scoot off to the other side. I don't wanna keep my center line facing my opponent. I would prefer getting an angle to my opponent, so I have more weapons available to me that my opponent has on me. For my fighting stance position, just to give you guys a little bit of fun, we're gonna introduce some strikes. When I say one, all I want you to do is send your left hand, your forward hand, straight out and back. When you send that hand straight out, turn your hip, turn your shoulder, straight line out and straight line back. If you want to make a fist, that's okay. You can also use the heel of your hand. For today, I'm going to use the heel of my hand. It's a little bit more forgiving when I hit a target. So it's straight out and straight back. Boom, boom. That's what we call a one. One, bam. When I call out two, it's going to be forward hand, rear hand. 1, 2. Again, my shoulders and hips are rotating. So I'm moving around. I call out 1, bam, move, 2, boom, boom. Left, right. When I call out 3, left, right, left hook. A left hook or a hook punch, the purpose of the hook punch is when your opponent is in a guard, hands up, you come around the side to hit your opponent, right? So that's the left hook. We call that a 3 combo. 1, 2, 3. Left, right, left hook. So now we're moving around. I call out 1, bam. 2, bam, bam. 3, bam, bam, bam. When I call out 4, left, right, left hook, right uppercut. The uppercut is an attack that comes from low to high. And again, when your opponent's hands are a little wider, or maybe when they're leaning forward, this strike is coming straight from low to high. So that's a 4 combo. Left, right, hook, uppercut. We're gonna add that in. Here we go. We're moving around, ready, and 1, bam. 2, bam, bam. 3, bam, bam, bam. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Excellent. Keep moving. 30 seconds left. 1, 2. Good. I'll add some other commands like 5 right knees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, bam, bam. 4, bam, 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 4, bam, 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 bam. 5 left knees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and time. Excellent. We can keep going like that. If you guys are interested in a workout, I'm going to share my screen again real fast. And give me 1 second. All you need to do is go, and you guys can do this anytime you want on your own. You simply go to YouTube. YouTube, no, that's the wrong one. Okay, once you're on YouTube, in the search bar, you write Krav Maga and Y. We're one of the first people that pop up right there. you click on Krav Maga NY, you get to see some videos on us, but more importantly, you can scroll down to this first section right here, training videos and workouts. Right here, you have what we call the strike workout, which is going to teach you these combinations that I just covered with you real fast. There's more to that. There's also other punch combos. This video will teach you the punch combos, and then you can listen to the 2-minute soundtrack, which is basically me calling out the combos. 1, 4, 5 right knees, 10 left knees, right straight, left hook, right? So I call out all those combos. This is a 2-minute workout, and we have one that's a little harder. That's a 3-minute workout. So you can be, you can learn Krav Maga at home watching these videos, or at least you can learn Krav Maga strikes at home watching the videos and practicing with the soundtracks. All right. I feel like I talked too much.
That was fantastic. Thank you both so much. I'm sorry to be on and off screen. I'm just doing a lot of coordinating. I wanted to give Josh one more second, just a chance to kind of talk about your industry right now and what's going on with the lack of work.
Sure, no problem. It's a interesting time for everybody, right? But specifically the event industry and the theatrical industry right now. Large crowds were frowned upon a little even before the lockdown happened, and then large crowds will continue to be frowned upon probably until almost 2021, right? So theater professionals, stage combat professionals, prop professionals, costumers, anybody you can think of involved in a theatrical production is either out of work or doing alternate work. I'm doing a lot of odd job construction work right now because I have a workshop and I can. So I'm pretty lucky that way. Erica's going to drop my PayPal in the chat if this was worthwhile and you think it's worth tipping me. Awesome. Buy me a cup of coffee. If not, or if you'd rather support a theater professional you know, this is the time I suggest you go send somebody else a cup of coffee, because as an industry right now, we all need it.
And Davide, you're in a similar situation with gyms and such being closed, right?
Yeah, gyms are closed. Gyms have been shut down since March 15th, March 16th, 18th, something like that. I was taking a look just recently at New York State executive orders by Governor Cuomo's office, and executive order number 200 came out at the beginning of March. I think it was March 7th. And last time I looked, since that 200 order came out, there was 15 or 16 variations. So 200.15, right? I think was the last one that I looked at. It may be more now. But gyms were shut down on 200.2, just to give you an idea. Like we were one of the original ones, right? So yeah, we've been shut down. There is nothing going on. We're closed. You know, we can't run classes. We try to do our best through Zoom classes. A lot of people also, you know, were affected by this financially. So we've received a ton of cancellations, ton of requests for hold. Fortunately, our landlord's been great. Our landlord is the same gentleman who owns a Forno restaurant. So he's been great with us, and you know, we're managing to you know, make it through. I don't know what the future is going to hold. I stopped worrying about it after I realized I have no control over the timeline. I don't know, you know, why try to worry about something that I can't control? So I'm just sitting back, waiting to see what happens, you know, and I'm doing the things that I should be doing, applying for, you know, government loans and grants and so on, and hopefully we can pull through. Not just us, but other businesses that are in our same position. I have instructors that I continue to pay. I have not sent them on furlough. I don't know how long I can keep that going for, but for now, as long as I can do that, I will do that. These people count on me for their job, and for me to just say to them, oh, you know, sorry, go on furlough. I couldn't bring myself to do it. So even though they're not teaching classes, they're still getting paid. And like I said, I'll do that for as long as I can. And at least if I go out knowing I did everything that I could for myself, for other people. And, whatever. So that's the position I'm in right now. It's not a great position, but I guess I still have my health, and so does my family, fortunately, right? And I feel bad for some other people that I know that have been impacted by this worse than just from a job perspective. So I guess I'm fortunate.
Well, we're so thankful that you're here. I'm sorry, Eric, I just jumped in. We're so thankful that you spent some time with us today. And, we're all volunteers, but we're closed too. Our space is closed in the Elephant Hotel or galleries and whatnot. But the main reason we wanted to do these Zoom programs is so people such as yourself have a forum and maybe can do a little extra networking, and that we can bring a little education and a little liveliness, if you will, to the area. And and if there's something we can do, also let us know.
Sure.
So thank you very, very much. So Eric, I didn't mean to jump in, but I also wanted to say, we're going to be doing these Sunday Zoom features for, who knows, a long time. So maybe you'll come back down the road and do something else. Hopefully, Josh will be bringing our swords to you, and maybe we can all get together and see in person parts of our collection from that we have.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome.
That's great. I had a lot of fun doing this. So yeah, I'd love to do it again. Sorry for my, I don't have a sword, Josh, but I have a lightsaber, Jedi lightsabers.
Yeah, I think these are your swords right here.
Yeah, right. That's it.
That's all right. My first prop was a broom handle. You're fine.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
I used an umbrella actually many years ago. Feeling pretty empowered with that umbrella in a situation, but didn't have to use it. But
it was good to know it was there.
Joining us.
Yeah, it was there. Yeah. One thing I wanted to say too for next week, we'll be here same time, same place, in front of your computer, but we're going to take a virtual tour of Muscoot Farm and learn about the history of Muscoot Farm with the curator there. And Jonathan Benjamin. Interestingly enough, the people that actually built Muscoot Farm and named it to what it is today, the Hopkins family, their family were one of the founders of the Historical Society some 60 years ago. So we have a special connection with Muscoot Farm. And hopefully if the weather's good, we'll get to see some animals and see some of their collections and hear what's going on with them. They're closed officially. You can hike on their back 40, but the farm itself is closed and the public buildings, and they don't know what's going to happen for them also going forward with classes and whatnot. So at any rate.
And a Zoom link is going to be sent out for that also?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I think, Erica, will it be the same? Okay.
Can I jump in?
Of
All
course.
right,
Can I jump in?
Of course,
Sure.
Nancy.
Yeah, to the Krav Maga, I would like to comment.
Sure.
I'm 85,
Yes.
but I have to tell you, I did enjoy you with your right hook, your undercut. It brought back memories of shopping at Macy's many years ago during a great sale. And I thought to myself, there are basic things in life that come in handy.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
what you're teaching is of great importance.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
I'm tempted to ask how the uppercut and the hook reminded you of shopping at Macy's, but
Well, have you ever been at a sale at Macy's?
I guess
On
not.
Herald Square?
Yeah, go the day after Thanksgiving and you'll see where it comes in handy.
Okay,
In Herald Square,
In Herald Square.
I can
Thank you.
attest to that too, Nancy. Good analogy there. Although that's not
Awesome.
when I had the umbrella.
Thank you all so much for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank
All right,
you.
Thank
you.
you. Bye
Bye-bye.
now.